Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Albums Through the Decades, the show we're doing throughout the month of May, where we pick a band that's been around for a long, long time and have released albums in more than we're usually trying to go 3 decades, 3 decades or 3 separate decades or more. And we got in the co-captain's chair today for this episode on Heart, Mr. Martin Popoff. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Absolutely. Doing fine. Any day talking about Heart's a good day. So
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because I didn't have them on my original list to cover this month, and then I don't know. I was somewhere a couple days ago, and I was listening to them. I think I was at the gym or something, and I was listening to the first album, and I'm like, wait a second, they've released albums in like what 5 different decades. Well, why do I not have them on my list to do? So, next time I talk to Martin, I'm like, hey, you want to do a Heart episode? He goes, yep.
right.
So done. There you have it. In the span of 3 days, we made it happen. So we've got the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. And I'm going to have Martin kick us off with the 70s.
Okay, so the 70s. So I'll start with an embarrassing admission. Until this morning, when I was going to do this, I've spent my whole life thinking this was a 1979 album, and I was shocked to find out that it came out in February 1980. So I was all set to all talk about Baby.
Time to rejig the list.
So weird, eh? That happens actually with Permanent Waves. I keep forgetting that Permanent Waves, because there's all this controversy. Did it come out January 1st? Is it a 79 album? Sort of. Is it an 80 album? Right. So, and I think Van Halen 1984 has got a bit of that problem too.
Yeah, I think
right?
so.
Yeah. So anyways, so for the 70s, I was kind of torn between Dog and Butterfly, Little Queen as well. But I actually had a surprise choice. I think it's kind of surprising. I went back to Dreamboat Annie because this is really, to me, this is their Van Halen 1 in a way. This is their most considered, well put together, executed strings, all that sort of stuff. A lot of layers, just really kind of well studied and put together album. It's got songs I never get tired of that are hits, like Magic Man, Dreamboat Annie, which has a reprise version, which is very kind of orchestrated. But Crazy on You is great on here. Sing Child is one of their heaviest songs of all time. People forget about that one. So this is a really good album. Magazine is sort of their hodgepodge album. You know, there's a lot of bad blood about that record. But no, this is a really, really solid, hard album. And, I thought for sure it would be probably Little Queen or Dog and Butterfly, but I went through the tracks again and realized that this is just stronger start to finish. So it's a little weird picking something that old, I think, from Heart. It reminds me of a Styx album, by the way, as well. It really feels like Styx Equinox to me, that sort of period of Styx, leading from the Wooden Nickel period into that. So yeah, interesting record, and just it's less casual. That's what I like about it. It's super, super professional.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and it's also my choice as well.
All right.
I just think this has, again, yeah, you meant it's old, it's the first album, but it has the essence of all this band does so well. You got the little folky bits, the heavier stuff, the more commercial pieces. I love it, and it's a tough decade, right? Because you got Little Queen and Dog and Butterfly are fantastic albums, but I always come back to this. I mean, Crazy on You and Magic Man are great songs. Man, Soul the Sea. I mean, just. Sing Child, amazing song. Love that riff. It's so heavy. The title, Dreamboat Annie, and the reprise, just fantastic. Anne's vocals are amazing on this album. And not that they aren't on all the other albums, because they are, but I mean, just incredible guitar work and just this really nice blend of styles throughout the whole album. It's like, you never know what's coming next. And again, it was so long ago, I don't remember what it was like to first hear this album, but it just kind of takes you on a ride, because it's like and do you remember back, I don't know, Martin, back in the day, like in the late 70s, even the early 80s, I mean, there were magazines that were calling these guys a heavy metal band. They were never a metal band, because they were just so much more than that. But you would see like these, Circus Magazine, Cream Magazine, they would have, oh, this is our heavy metal issue. And there you would see the Wilson sisters at the bottom of the page. I'm like, what? Alongside Ted Nugent and, Nazareth and all these other bands, which arguably some of them are really not heavy metal, right? But I just love this album, and how can you not just like fall in love with the Wilson sisters and look at the front cover, right? So, but a great band. I mean, that original Heart band, so good, and again, the use of acoustic and electric guitar is so well done. a magical album for me, and one of the 70s best albums in my opinion. Just love it.
Cool.
But their
Excellent.
first, Magazine is kind of a weird album, but I mean, Little Queen and Dog and Butterfly are just magical albums too.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So for the 80s, I was going to go with this one. I love Passion Works. I just did an episode of my podcast, History in 5 Songs, where I talked about cusp albums, which are albums that marry kind of the best of the old with something new. And there's this kind of crossover place where they hit something really, really interesting. And I use this as one of the 5 examples. Love this album to death. It's the nascent hair metal era, but I think they just do everything so well on it. But since Baby Lestrange has been rewritten in history as of this morning as a 1980s album, this has always been my favorite Heart album of all time. So I had to pick this, and I'm absolutely a big supporter of this one as well. A lot of people don't like it. It was a bomb. The Heart sisters themselves aren't crazy about it. But Baby Lestrange with that opening title track, this reminds me of Night in the Ruts a lot for some reason. And maybe that's why I thought it was a 79 album, because Even It Up sounds like they're no surprise. I mean, I love that idea about it. But it's got some heavy songs in here. Break is that cool punky one with the weird chord changes, really cool. And Baby Lestrange is great. Rockin' Heaven Down. I like the mellow stuff, more of the mellow stuff on side 2. But this is a nice kind of urgent, bare bones, get to the point sort of album. I got to interview Nancy a little while ago and talked about it with her a little. She loves this album. So I think this is just kind of a well put together album where there's a new identity to the band, and even more of an identity in the band in terms of just kind of the arrangements to this. I don't know. It just feels like it kind of hits you between the eyes. It's just really cool that way. And again, yeah, it always reminded me of Night in the Ruts, Aerosmith. There you go.
Yeah, it's my choice as well.
Okay.
I dig this album a lot.
Yeah.
So how would the French pronounce this? Baby Lestrange, is that how they say it, right? Something
know.
like that.
I
always said Baby Lestrange, but yeah, I think the correct pronunciation, because I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments gonna be like, you say it this way, Baby Lestrange. Anyway, who cares? Great album cover. They look absolutely amazing on the cover. The title track is great. Down on Me is awesome. Rockin' Heaven Down, Even It Up is such a cool track. Love that little, guitar lick in there. Just awesome. Sweet Darling, gorgeous song. I like it. And I think your comparison to the Night in the Ruts era is pretty spot on. It's got that late 70s kind of, I don't know, gritty feel to it, which I dig quite a bit. Maybe not a lot of the folky stuff from earlier albums on it, but I don't think it suffers because of that. It's just a good rock record, right? And it's commercial sounding enough, and the production's really good. Yeah, I dig it. Good stuff. And
it only went gold, right? It was the last one of that era, and then they have the lull. I mean, I still can't believe Passion Works is not a massive album with How Can I Refuse and Allies on it and stuff like that.
Yeah, great songs. You know what? I like all the 80s albums. Even the really big commercial ones.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't? No, I don't mind them. I think they're, granted, it's a different Heart because, the songs are being written for them, but they're big sounding. It's arena rock. I don't mind them, but yeah, I mean, you're right. The Baby Lestrange, Private Audition, and Passion Works kind of ignored for the most part, and they're all 3 of them are really, really strong. So, but it kind of put them, they were kind of like forgotten for a while. Then they had to come back with these, big sounding albums that, songs written by other people and hit singles and videos all over the place as Heart enters the hair metal arena, I guess you can call it, right? So, but,
yeah. All right. So for the 90s, the Heart didn't have any albums in the 90s because they were all 80s albums anyways. I mean, they only had 2 albums in the 90s. And for some reason, I'm kind of surprised that Desire Walks On, which would be my choice. I'm surprised that record. There we go. I mean, look at that cover. I mean, it looks like an 80s album, right?
Yeah.
I am surprised that how tapped in, how musicology that band is, and how they are from Seattle, and this is the grunge era and all that, and they seem to be tapped in with all that kind of thing. That album is still very, very corporate rock. It's Dwayne Barron and John Purdell production. I think the production is just way gratuitous, over the top still. Here's the other one, Brigade. So they had those 2 records that I think are too similar and too much like the late 80s albums that I definitely don't like. So you know, I having to pick one, I'm going to go with Desire Walks On. What did I say for notes here? It just says overproduced all over the place, dated keys, pensive ballad, up tempo pensive ballad, a little Tom Cochrane-y. I don't know if a lot of people know about Tom Cochrane up here in Red Rider, but it has that little bit of a feel there. The title track is kind of heavy and proggy. That's a pretty cool one. So you know, you could almost hear the songwriting sort of slowly coming back. Everything's, you know, they're in on the songwriting, but there's all these co-writers and stuff too still. So they're still doing that. So you could hear the songwriting kind of coming back, but the production hasn't come back at all, which makes it completely unlistenable to me. So I'm going to abstain and say there are no good hard albums in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I had a hard time with these two. I ultimately went with Brigade, just because I find that Desire Walks On is really mellow. And at least there's a couple of good rockers on this album. I like Wild Child a bit. I Never Need to Hear All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. To me, that's one of the worst singles they ever put out. And I apologize for all the dogs going berserk in the background. Here we go. It's training morning on Friday. The Night is a pretty good song. You know, Stranded is all right. Call the Wild. I don't know. I mean, there's enough on here to like. I find I don't listen to these two from this decade much at all, either one of them. But and I agree with a lot of what you said. They're overproduced, and it's kind of taken away from what Heart is all about. But thankfully, they would get back to some really good music fairly soon thereafter. So as we move into the 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. So the 2000s. So it is only it is only the one album in the 2000s, right?
Yep.
Jupiter's Darling.
That's it.
And one of the greatest Heart albums of all time. This is so underrated. It's so good. And yeah, this is Heart absolutely coming back. It sounds like a traditional Heart album, but it's ambitious. You know, a lot of songs in terms of having acoustic and mandolin and a little bit of the heavy grungy stuff. So it's a little bit, you know, getting out there on a creative limb. It's got things as like almost like a gallows pole, bluegrassy kind of thing on here. Oldest Story in Town, not crazy about. It's almost too jarringly heavy, but Make Me, you know, a cool acoustic stuff in there. Great recording. So you know, if there were a bunch of albums in the 2000s, strictly speaking, this would have always come high because it's so good. This is a great Heart album. So there you go.
Yeah, obviously it's default. It's my choice as well, but I agree with everything Martin just said. It's a really good album. It's a kind of a long album. There's a lot of material on here, but it does not get laborious at all. And I think it just goes back to what Heart, like you said, what Heart did really well, mixing a little bit of the folky stuff with the rock and the pop. And that's what Heart is all about, right? And I think they kind of got away from that a little bit, especially, you know, a lot of people missed the folky aspect of what Heart always did so well on those kind of 80s and early 90s album. And there's plenty of that here, and a really good sounding record. And again, this is Heart, you know, got new lineup and everything, new musicians coming in the band, joining the sisters. And I think it's a very solid album. And again, I don't recall that this was a big selling album for them, but I think for the hardcore fans, this was a really good return to form, and I like this. And I think they would go on and continue. I personally, the next choice that I'm going to pull out is one of my favorite Heart albums of the last like 30 plus years, but we'll get to that in a second. So back to you.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I guess we had a choice between these two, and they had a reworking album as well that they did of old songs, but so these are the two studio situations, and they're both really good. I think this is the one that's a little more like Jupiter's Darling and maybe easier on the ears, but I thought I would go with Fanatic because it is so creatively brave, and I like that about it. It's heavy and jarring, but it's also quite varied. I just think they came back and they were actually a little more you know, adventurous than the likes of a Deep Purple or a Kiss or any of these other bands that are making a lot of really good albums now. You know, Motorhead, King's X, you know, another one. I know we don't talk about King's X too much in this situation, but but for the 70s bands that have come back and made some of their greatest records, I think this is one where they kind of went out on a limb and did some different things, and there's a lot of neat production tips and tricks on it. And yeah, this was quite talked about at the time, much more than this record. This kind of came and went a little bit, but people were pretty excited about Fanatic, and yeah, so was I. I think this is a really good album. So there you go.
Yeah, I agree. It is my choice as well. Both albums were really good, and I even like the other album, which has some new tracks and re-recorded stuff. But I played this a ton when it came out. It's heavy. There's some good pop moments, and you know what? Weird thing about this album, this really feels and sounds like a Seattle album. Like, to me, this is almost kind of like their, it's like the Soundgarden album for them. It's like there's just this grungy, heavy stuff going on here. There's some cool Zeppelin-y stuff. I mean, that song Mashallah, awesome track. 59 Crunch is heavy. A Million Miles is great. You got Dear Old America, the title track, Fanatic. I mean, Skin and Bones, Million Miles, really strong album. The sisters sound confident. They're not afraid to go, like you mentioned, go into some different areas, different textures going on here. I dig this album a lot. I still listen to this today, and I think it's easily one of their best albums since the early 80s.
Yeah, and I like when Anne later on, when she like exerts herself and sings and pushes a lot of air, she's got a lot of vocal fry kind of starting to go on in her voice, which is really cool. So there's like some extra angry dimensions that come out on these later albums. So yeah, it was cool. And with the one word title, it's got that grunge feel to it, right? And the black and white picture, and
it just totally feels like a 90s, like kind of like Seattle record to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, good stuff. And what was the Beautiful Broken? Is that the one that came? The other one that had, is that the title of?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
There's some really good stuff on that. I almost considered that too, because I like that quite a bit. I mean, it wasn't going to top this one for the decade, but I like Beautiful Broken quite a bit. There's some really good stuff on that.
Yeah, and I think they did I can't remember how many, but they did not ignore this record when they did Beautiful Broken. There's something on there from this, and oh man, this album I played a lot. I really like Private Audition, but yeah, that was a total bomb for them. And then Passion Works was the end of the label deal, and onto that massive second wind, right?
Yeah. Which I know that made them a lot of money, but I know the sisters have talked a little bit about how they regret some of the stuff they did during those few years. But again, it lined their bank accounts quite a bit, so I guess you can't really complain too much about it, right? Maybe artistically you feel a little, maybe we shouldn't have recorded all those tracks, but hey, whatever. But good to, and it's really good to see the sisters are back together again, because I was getting a little worried there for a while.
A lot of drama.
Kind of unfortunate, when things happen within families, right? But that seems to be okay now, and hopefully when bands start going out and touring in the very near future, we'll see Heart on the road once again. So there you have it, everybody. So in the comments below, please list your favorite releases from each decade in Heart, in the history of Heart: 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and the 2010s. So Martin, any word on the Uriah Heep book?
It's on its way over. The Yes one apparently is finished too. That's going to be shipping soon. So that's the Yes visual biography and the Heap. And I actually have all three of the first ones that we did. I have a stock of the Van Halen, the Bluish Cult, the Thin Lizzy. So yeah, martinpopoff.com for any of those. Cool. And make sure everybody get that third Rush book too, which is quite nice as well. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Coming up, let's see. We've got all sorts of interesting things happening this weekend. We've got ranking the albums of Blind Guardian, no Blind Gardens here. Ranking the albums of the Tony Williams lifetime. Ranking the albums of Stanley Clarke solo records. Hudson Valley Squares, In the Prague Seat, New Review Day on Wednesday, Monsters Den on Thursday, Jeff Coleman coming on the show on Thursday as well, and then Martin's coming back for a pretty cool show next Friday morning. Martin, you want to talk a little bit about that one? Yeah, so that's our song endings situation, right? I want to mention, have you ever seen, this came out quite a while ago, and I don't know if it's something you see or if it's an audio thing, but someone went and arranged the ending of all the AC/DC songs. Have you ever heard of that thing? No. Oh, it's unbelievable. Like they almost all like lurch to a stop with a yelp from either Bon or it was graphic. It's quite amazing. Go check it out on and see if it's on YouTube. I'm gonna go see after we're done here and see if it's on there. But yeah, they basically took like the 2 seconds of the end of every AC/DC song and strung them all together.
Wow.
Yeah, and it really shows you how they have one way of ending these songs. They
And
don't
that's it.
fade out songs, you know.
They don't
I,
do right?
you never think about who does fade out songs, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's it's quite wild. Go check that out. But yeah, that'll be fun exploring those. I haven't started my list yet, but
Yeah. Oh,
that'll
you
be
mentioned it's interesting you talk about fade outs because there are some really good fade out songs that I think are legendary. But then there are some that are like, wait, keep going. I like what you're doing there. Like I can think of, well, I'm not going to give it away because I might actually pick one of them. But yeah, there's some really good fade outs, but they're not that common anymore.
yeah,
It was, I guess, like a 70s and early 80s thing.
yeah.
So, interesting. So that's coming up. So we're going to pick each our 5 favorite songs that have just absolutely killer endings. So we're talking about the last like 30 seconds to the end of the song, that sort of thing, this big crescendo. And then the following Friday, our favorite band logos, which somehow, some way, never covered on this channel before.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it. Our 10 favorite band logos. This should be fun. Trying to whittle it down to 10, I think, is going to be the interesting thing. But so that's coming up here on the channel. So stay tuned for all that on Friday mornings. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one, everybody.